Northfield Reckoning, a wild western adventure. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Northfield, Minnesota, as Jesse James adjusted the collar of his linen duster and checked his pocket watch. 8:30 sharp. The First National Bank would be opening its doors in exactly 30 minutes, and by 9 o'clock, he and his boys would either be rich men or dead ones. Jesse stood in the doorway of Wheeler's Hardware, studying the bank across Division Street like a general surveying a battlefield. At 34, his face still carried the boyish charm that had made Missouri girls swoon, but his pale blue eyes held the cold calculation of a man who'd been making war for more than half his life. The neat beard and mustache couldn't quite hide the scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth, a Confederate saber cut from the battle at Centralia, back when the killing had a flag to justify it. "Awful quiet for a town this size," Frank James observed, stepping up beside his younger brother. Where Jesse was fire and quicksilver, Frank was stone and steel, older by 4 years, graying at the temples with the steady nerves of a man who'd learned early that staying alive meant thinking before shooting. Jesse's laugh was soft as silk and twice as dangerous. "Quiet's good for business, brother. Quiet means the local law's probably nursing a hangover, and the citizens are all safe at home, counting their money." But even as he said it, something was nagging at Jesse, that peculiar itch between his shoulder blades that had kept him breathing through a dozen bank robberies and twice as many gunfights. Northfield looked wrong somehow, too neat, too prepared. Like a stage set, waiting for the actors to take their places. Cole Younger emerged from the barbershop across the street, his massive frame filling the doorway. Cole was built like a Missouri mule, broad shoulders, thick neck, and hands that could crush a man's windpipe or gentle a skittish horse with equal ease. Behind him came his brothers Jim and Bob, along with Clell Miller, Bill Chadwell, and Charlie Pitts. 8 men in all, the cream of Missouri's outlaw crop, veterans of Quantrill's raiders and the long, bloody years that followed Appomattox. "Bank's got 2 clerks and a cashier," Cole reported, his voice pitched low enough that only Jesse and Frank could hear. "Chadwell says there's usually about 15,000 in the vault, maybe more on account of it being harvest season." Jesse nodded, but his eyes were still scanning the street, looking for the thing that was making his instincts scream warnings. A farm wagon loaded with corn was parked in front of the Scriver block. An old man in overalls was whittled on the steps of Ames Mill. 2 women in bonnets were discussing fabric in front of Goodsel's dry goods store. All perfectly normal. All perfectly wrong. "Something's not right," Frank murmured, echoing Jess's thoughts. "Could be nothing," Cole said, but his hand drifted toward the butt of his Navy Colt. "Could be we're just spooked on account of that business down in Kansas City." The Kansas City business had been a disaster, a simple bank job that went sideways when a Pinkerton agent happened to be making a deposit. 3 dead, including one of their own, and a 100-mile chase across 2 states before they finally shook the posse. Jesse had been thinking about it ever since, wondering if maybe their luck was finally running out. "Orders are orders," Jesse said finally. "We came here to rob a bank, and by God, that's what we're going to do." They split up, according to plan. Cole, Bob Younger, and Charlie Pitts would go into the bank first, playing the part of customers. Jesse and Frank would follow 5 minutes later to handle the vault. Jim Younger, Clell Miller, and Bill Chadwell would hold the horses and watch the street. Jesse pulled out his watch again. 8:45. In 15 minutes, it would all be over, one way or another. That's when he saw her. The woman was standing in front of Manning's restaurant, dressed in a dark blue traveling dress with a matching hat that shadowed her face. She was watching the bank with the same intensity Jesse had been, but there was something professional about her attention, the way she kept checking the street, noting the positions of the horses, cataloging escape routes. And she was beautiful, in that dangerous way that made smart men do stupid things. Dark hair, pale skin, and green eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Jesse had seen women like her before, usually just before the shooting started. "Frank," he said quietly, I see her. Frank's voice carried the flat tone it took on when he was calculating odds. Question is, what do we do about her? Before Jesse could answer, the woman turned and walked directly toward them. Her movements were fluid, confident, like a cat stalking prey. She stopped just close enough to speak without being overheard by passing townspeople. Mr. James, she said, her voice carrying just a hint of Kentucky bluegrass. Might I have a word? Jess's hand was already inside his coat, fingers wrapping around the grip of his Colt .45. Do we know you, miss? Sarah Matthews, she replied, extending a gloved hand that neither brother took. And no, we haven't been introduced. But I know you, your brother, and every man in your gang. Just as I know you're planning to rob the First National Bank in approximately 10 minutes. Frank stepped slightly to his right, positioning himself for a crossfire if things went bad. That's an interesting theory, Miss Matthews. What makes you think we're anything other than travelers passing through? Sarah's smile was sharp as winter wind. Because I've been following you for 3 weeks, ever since you hit the bank in Otterville. The Pinkerton National Detective Agency pays well for information about the movements of certain notorious individuals. The words hit Jesse like a physical blow. Pinkerton. The name alone was enough to make his blood run cold. It was Pinkertons who'd thrown that incendiary device through the window of his mother's farmhouse, killing his 8-year-old half-brother and mangling his mother's arm. Pinkertons who'd hunted him and Frank across half the country, turning their names into something between legend and curse. If you're a Pinkerton, Jesse said, his voice deadly quiet, then you just made the biggest mistake of your short life. Oh, but I'm not a Pinkerton anymore, Sarah said, and now her smile held genuine warmth. I was, until I learned what they really did to your family. What they do to anyone who gets in their way. Some lines shouldn't be crossed, even in the name of law and order. Jesse studied her face, looking for the tell that would reveal the lie. But all he saw was sincerity and something else, a kind of cold anger that matched his own. So what are you? Frank asked. If not Pinkerton, then what? Independent contractor. I work for whoever pays best, and right now, that happens to be a certain railroad baron who has his own reasons for wanting the James Younger gang to succeed in their business ventures. Which railroad baron? Jesse asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. Jay Cook. He's got interests in half the banks between here and Denver, but the First National of Northfield isn't one of them. In fact, he'd be quite pleased to see his competitors suffer a significant financial setback. Jesse had heard of Cook, Northern Pacific Railroad, financial empire built on government subsidies and political corruption. The kind of man who'd cheerfully burn down half the country if it meant adding another million to his fortune. What's the catch? Frank asked. Because there was always a catch. Simple. This isn't just a bank robbery. It's a trap. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. The Pinkertons have been planning this for months. They know you're here, they know your plan, and they've turned half the town into a killing ground. Jesse felt his world tilt sideways. How? Your man Chadwell. He's been feeding information to Alan Pinkerton personally for the better part of a year. Every job you've pulled, every hideout you've used, every move you've made, it all went straight to Chicago. The betrayal hit Jesse harder than a gut punch. Bill Chadwell had been with them since the war, had fought beside them at Lawrence and Baxter Springs, had saved Frank's life during the Russellville job. If Chadwell was a traitor. Prove it, Frank said. Sarah reached into her reticule and withdrew a folded telegram. This came through the Western Union office an hour ago. It's addressed to Agent William Chadwell, confirming that additional operatives are in position. Jesse read the telegram twice, his hands steady despite the rage building in his chest. The signature, At the bottom was unmistakable: Alan Pinkerton himself. "Son of a bitch," he whispered. "The plan was to let you get inside the bank, then spring the trap," Sarah continued. 50 armed men hidden in buildings around the square, all waiting for the signal. You'd have been cut down like wheat at harvest time. Jesse looked across the street to where Chadwell was holding the reins of 4 horses, his face a mask of casual concern. The bastard was probably counting his Pinkerton gold already. "Why tell us?" Frank asked. "If Cook wants us alive, why not just warn us off?" "Because running away doesn't serve his purposes. He needs the First National to be robbed, not by you, but by men he can control. Men who'll leave the kind of evidence that points back to his competitors." Jesse was beginning to see the bigger picture. "He wants us dead, but not until after we've served his purposes." "Exactly. There's a back way into the bank through the alley. You go in that way, clean out the vault, and disappear before the Pinkertons spring their trap. They kill Chadwell and whoever else they can catch, but you and Frank get away clean with enough money to disappear forever." It was elegant in its simplicity, and Jesse found himself almost admiring the audacity of it. Use the James Younger gang to rob a bank, then let the Pinkertons kill them while the real mastermind counted his profits. Almost. "What's to stop us from just riding out of town right now?" Frank asked. "Nothing," Sarah admitted. "But you won't. Because you're Jesse James, and Jesse James doesn't run from a fight. Especially not when there's $50,000 sitting in that vault." She was right, and Jesse hated her for it. Running went against every instinct he'd developed in 20 years of war and outlawry. Besides, the idea of Pinkerton agents waiting to ambush him made his trigger finger itch. "The back entrance," he said. "How many guards?" 2. "Local men, not professionals. They're expecting trouble to come from the street, not from behind." Jesse checked his watch again. 8:50. Cole and the others would be starting their approach in 5 minutes, walking straight into a trap that would leave them all dead or captured. Unless he did something about it. "Frank," he said, "take Jim and Bob, circle around to the alley. Give me 10 minutes, then go through that back door like the devil himself was on your tail." "What about Cole and the others?" Jess's smile was cold as January wind. "I'm going to give them a warning they won't soon forget." He walked across Division Street with the loose-limbed gait of a man completely at ease, his hands swinging free at his sides. To anyone watching, he looked like just another traveler heading for the bank to conduct some routine business. Chadwell saw him coming and nodded casually. "Little early, ain't we?" "Change of plans, Bill." Jess's voice was conversational, friendly even. "We got word there might be trouble." "What kind of trouble?" But Jesse could see the flicker of panic in Chadwell's eyes, the slight tensing of his shoulders. "The kind that comes with 30 pieces of silver and a Pinkerton badge." Jess's hand moved with the speed that had made him legend. The Colt appeared in his fist like magic, the barrel coming to rest against Chadwell's forehead before the traitor could even blink. "Jesse, what the hell?" Chadwell started. "Shut up." Jess's voice was deadly quiet. "Just shut your lying Pinkerton mouth and listen. You're going to walk over to that bank, and you're going to tell Cole and the boys to ride out of town right now. Fast and quiet, no questions asked." "I don't know what you're talking about." Jesse pulled back the hammer with a sharp click that seemed to echo off the surrounding buildings. "Bill, I got a telegram in my pocket with your name on it, signed by Alan Pinkerton himself. Now you can do what I tell you, and maybe live through the next 5 minutes, or you can keep lying to my face, and I'll paint these wooden sidewalks with your brains." Chadwell's face went pale as morning mist. "Jesse, you got to understand, they had leverage on me. My sister, they said they'd." "I understand plenty. Now move." They walked together toward the bank. Jess's gun hidden beneath his coat, but pressed firmly against Chadwell's ribs. Cole Younger looked up as they approached, his weathered face creasing into a frown. "Trouble," Jesse said simply. "Pinkertons. We need to ride." Cole didn't ask questions. That was one of the things Jesse had always admired about him. When the shooting started, Cole acted first and worried about explanations later. He whistled sharply, a sound that would bring the other boys running. "How many?" Cole asked, his hands already checking his weapons. 50, maybe more. Hidden all around the square. Bob Younger emerged from the bank, his face tight with confusion. "Jesse? What's going on?" "Pinkerton trap. We're leaving. Now." That's when the shooting started. The first shot came from a second-story window in the Scriver block, the bullet whining off the hitching post beside Jess's head. Then the street exploded into chaos, as armed men appeared from doorways, windows, and alleyways, all firing at once. Jesse shoved Chadwell away from him and dove behind a water trough, his Colts filling his hands as if by magic. The wood beside his head splintered under the impact of rifle bullets, but he was already returning fire, his shots carefully aimed despite the confusion. Cole Younger was bellowing like an angry bull, his big Navy Colt booming as he advanced on a group of Pinkertons who'd taken cover behind a wagon. Bob Younger was down, clutching his shoulder, but still firing with his left hand. And through it all, Jesse could hear Frank's guns roaring from the direction of the bank's rear entrance. His brother had made it inside and was fighting his way to the vault. Jesse put 3 rounds through the window where the first shot had come from, then rolled to a new position as return fire chewed up the spot where he'd been lying. A Pinkerton agent stepped out from behind the barber shop, rifle raised, and Jesse shot him twice in the chest before he could fire. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When the smoke cleared, 4 Pinkertons lay dead in the street, and 2 more were wounded. But the cost had been high. Bob Younger was badly hurt, Clell Miller was dead, and Charlie Pitts was bleeding from a bullet wound in his leg. And Bill Chadwell lay face down in the dust, 3 bullet holes in his back. Jesse couldn't tell if they'd come from Pinkerton guns or from one of his own men who'd figured out the truth. Frank appeared from the bank's rear entrance, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder, and his face grim with satisfaction. "Got it," he said simply. They mounted up and rode out of Northfield like the hounds of hell were on their trail, leaving behind a street littered with bodies and a story that would be told and retold until it became legend. Miles later, when they finally stopped to rest and tend their wounds, Jesse found Sarah Matthews waiting for them beside a creek that ran clear and cold through a grove of cottonwood trees. 50,000, she said, nodding toward Frank's canvas bag. "Just as promised." "Minus the cost of betrayal," Jesse replied, thinking of Chadwell's body lying in Northfield's dusty street. "There's always a cost, Mr. James. The question is whether you're willing to pay it." Jesse looked back toward Northfield, where smoke was probably still rising from the battle that had turned a simple bank robbery into a massacre. The Pinkertons would be coming after them harder than ever now, and there would be more Chadwells, more betrayals, more blood. But there would also be more banks, more chances to strike back at the system that had tried to destroy him and everything he held dear. "We'll pay it," he said finally. "Whatever it costs, we'll pay it." Sarah smiled and disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind only the sound of running water and the promise of more violence to come. Jesse James rode on through the night, carrying $50,000 and the weight of a legend that was growing heavier with each passing mile. Want even more Wild West adventure? Saddle up and join Rip Campbell on the range. Wild Western Rip Campbell Adventures. Duckfoot Ranch. Pecan Creek War. Scatter Shot. $10 Mustang. Pistol Whipped. Red River Ferry. Last Drop. Cow Puncher. Bearcat Pass. Fast Shot. As Good as Gold. Ramble Range, Claim Jumper, Gunpowder Trouble, Bushwhack Range, Bearwash War, Kicking Dust, Outlaw Range, Six Gun Preacher. Or grab one half of these in the box set on Amazon. Saddle up. Want all 30 Wild Western novels in one massive box set bundle? There are even more Wild Western adventures waiting on you at the pass. Head 'em off.